I think where we get in the weeds a little bit is I think like a lot. I think human nature generally is racist. I think trying to get humans to not be so not racist, not I mean just like bigoted
Well, what you're talking
or
about is
xenophobic.
tribalism.
Yeah, yeah, or tribal essentially. Like, are you familiar with Gordon Allport?
Well, hold on.
His book on
Well, I don't
prejudice.
think we need to go that way because you're right that there is some degree of a natural tribalistic tendency among humans. But again, I don't care because just if something is natural doesn't mean that it's good or it's the way that humans should live. I bring up this point a
Yeah,
lot, but like
yeah.
part of the reason that humans have made it to the top, right? We're like the king of nature or whatever. Part of the reason is because humans don't just follow their instincts or just go the natural route. We literally fight against nature when necessary.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand that. That's kind of a to me. That's kind of a technocratic viewpoint. Like, I
Anyway, let's just jump into this. So you hit me up. You wanted to talk about ethnic nationalism. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, so what
So,
exactly is that? Because to me that sounds like white nationalism, but maybe not on the basis of white people. Is it just like on the basis of
yeah.
race?
So yeah, I haven't prepared. Let me think about this. So yeah, essentially, I mean, I differentiate between race and ethnicity. I don't really care about race. I think it's a weird American concept, to be honest. I never really thought about race. I think it's pretty silly, but I do think ethnicity is important.
Okay.
So I was kind of wondering where we disagree. Like, do you believe in the concept of ethnicity, and do you think it's important?
Well, why do you think it's important as far as like differentiating nations, I guess, on the basis of people's ethnicity?
Yeah, so I think ethnicity is important essentially because, well, I define ethnicity essentially by a group of people who share a history, some broad set of values or what they care about, share a language, and share, yeah, generally those things. Yeah, it's kind of a sense of, yeah, language, shared history, and values.
Okay, language,
So would you
shared
agree with
history, and
that?
values. But okay, so I mean, yeah, I can
Would you agree with
understand.
that definition?
Yeah, sure, I'm good with that. And usually, I think I should further clarify that it seems as though when we're talking about ethnicity, we're also talking about heritage and whatnot on the basis of a certain region, right? So, um,
I mean, honestly, I think that's kind of less important, to be honest. Like, yeah, you could say most of like the thing, like you could say there's a big correlation between shared region and shared values and shared language and shared history, obviously, because usually the people in a certain region have those things. But I honestly don't think that's really the most important part, to be honest. I think it's mainly just if you have shared values, shared history, and shared language, that's pretty much you're part of an ethnicity.
okay, so
That's kind of how I see it.
you want to have a nation where the majority of the people share similar values, I guess.
Yeah, so my the next part I think is probably where we disagree more is that do you find that I find that to be very important for people, humans in general, like to have that sense of ethnicity, shared values, shared history, shared language with other people. I think, in
I
my
think
opinion, I think humans find that very important.
Well, I mean, I think
Do you,
shared language is going to be important, just for a practical reason. I mean, obviously, if you're living in a society, then yeah, ideally you'll all speak the same language. I think that that's pretty important. But when you say like same heritage, I'm not exactly sure how that would influence.
history.
Okay, same history. I don't know how much that would necessarily influence certain aspects. Like people here in America, for example, we tend to like the majority of the population. Obviously, we all speak English, um, but like we have different histories and different values, even. And I don't think that means that we cannot coexist together. I think that you'd have to really get down into the nitty gritty, as in what exactly are those values, right? So, like, obviously, if I am trying to share a space with someone else whose value is everybody I see who speaks English, I want to kill them, then yeah, that kind of a value probably won't be able to coexist in broader society. But as far as like America goes, most people have different values. I mean, whether we're talking about political values or religious values, but we can still coexist together.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm getting at, so you said a few things. So about the shared history not being, you don't. So you're saying you were saying the first thing you were saying is like you don't think shared history is that important or that critical for. or that meaningful for anything.
I don't think it. Hold on. I think that shared history can be important, but I don't know if it's important to the point that we should form nations around that.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, so maybe we disagree here. So I think shared history is important, and I'll tell you why, obviously.
I'm gonna write this
Um,
down too because I want to remember. Did you say so? It's shared history,
yeah,
language,
shared history, shared language, and shared
values.
kind of broad values. And
Okay.
we can get more into the values thing later, but I want to focus on the things separately first, I suppose.
Okay.
Um, because I think it's really just the amalgamation of everything that and why I think anyway, whatever. So anyway, shared history. So yeah, why I think shared history is important. Um, right. So I think shared history is important because of essentially the idea of kind of mythological how do I say? Like almost like a mythological origin story. I think people generally feel more connected to each other when they feel that they've been through the same things. So I think a great example is Black Americans,
Hmm.
African Americans, the people who are the descendants of the slaves, and so they really have a strong sense of shared history, and they have a sense that they've toiled through or a nice not them personally, at least their family and their heritage has toiled through the effects of slavery.
Right.
And so I think for them the sense of shared history is extremely important. Would you disagree with that?
I think their sense of shared history is definitely important, and I think that it does play a role. But again, I don't know if that's a requirement for a nation to function properly, because we can also
Yeah,
talk about how there are plenty of people who, I mean, white people and black people, we've come quite a long way, right? Compared to the racism that used to exist in this country. There's still systemic racism and definitely still interpersonal racism. But I mean, compared to how it was in the early 1900s, we've obviously come a really long way. White people and black people don't have the same history, but yet we're
right.
progressing towards being able to work together and coexist just fine.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's a logical leap essentially for me, saying, okay, shared history is important, but then essentially I'm saying that that means this is a contributor to why I believe there should almost be separate nations
Nations,
essentially based on
right?
that. So yeah, we can get into that. So okay, you think shared history is important, but not enough to assume that you need separate nations.
Well,
Um,
especially if I could just add one other thing is that there are also different shared histories even among black people, right? Like not every black person is going to take the same or view the same value in even having that history. And so I think that there's even going to be some variance there as well.
yeah, no, that's for sure. I mean, I'm talking about broad strokes, like in terms of like that's why I was saying, it's almost mythological, like having a mythological origin story. Like
Yeah,
Black
see, to
Americans, I
me, that
think
sounds
would
kind of
generally,
corny almost, like a mythological origin story. Like, I think that if you have a shared history, again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know if it's that important, especially to the degree that we should be separating nations on the basis of it. But I know I already said that, so go ahead.
yeah. So I mean, why I think it's important is because usually ethnogenesis. Do you think ethnogenesis? You know, are you familiar with that term, ethnogenesis?
I'm not.
Like when an ethnicity might come about.
Okay, I got you.
Um, like when a group of people think that they're one group of people is generally a result of some kind of oppression or struggle,
Okay.
for the most part. I mean, at least in the modern day, like has happened many times with
Well, yeah, I guess you
Palestinians
could argue that for a
or
lot of European Americans, like some of our shared history might be coming to America originally because previously they felt oppressed with the Church of
right,
England and whatnot. So, sure,
right.
I'm with you there
And
so far.
even Americans as a whole, you can say the ethnogenesis might have happened when they fought the British against monarchy and wanted democracy and those kinds of things. Um, so what was I getting at there? So yeah, generally, I think ethnogenesis occurs when there's some kind of sense of struggle, and I think when people go through a shared sense of struggle, like Armenians, Palestinians, Black Americans, really Kurds, really anyone, they feel much more of a kinship amongst each other, and also as a result of the struggle, they want to separate from the people that might have uh, they want to they kind of naturally want to separate into their own little group and to make sure they're safe, essentially, like Jews, for example, too.
Okay. Well, there's not
Like
really too like even with I wouldn't have brought up Jews if I were you because I mean, Jews do share a shared history as far as plenty of discrimination throughout the ages. However, I bring this up a lot, but especially when we're talking about religious Jews, there's a fuck ton of disagreement among those Jews. So there's Orthodox Jews, and then there's the new Reform Jews. And I think that Orthodox Jews say they have virtually nothing in common with the new Reform Jews, and yet they have a shared history, but they don't have shared values.
Yeah, I mean, well, are you a Zionist? Like, do you believe that the Jewish state's an okay thing?
I don't usually get into that just because it's something that I would need to do a lot more research on.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so I don't want to say too much about myself, but I am Jewish, and I mean, I hear this argument a lot. I think it's a little dishonest because just so many like very few Jews are non-Zionist. Like the vast majority, like just being in the
Yeah,
world
but
that
that's
I've
just
been in.
one aspect, right? So because I mean, I know
What
we're
do you
not
mean?
really at the shared values part yet, but that's just one aspect of it. If we're talking about the elements of religiosity, like the religious beliefs when we're talking about Judaism, yeah, maybe the vast majority of them are pro-Israel, but then they will differ in Judaism, in New Reform or Orthodox. So even if they
I'm not
have
sure
that
how that's
shared
relevant.
history, well, because it's somebody who has a shared history. However, they do not have the shared values, even though they have a shared history.
Oh no, but I was just saying that the shared history informed their desire for a Jewish state that's separate, that like establishes a Jewish majority. Like
Okay, but I
like
mean,
the
you could
vast
argue
majority
that
of
from the other
Jews.
side, right? Because the Palestinians are oftentimes feeling oppressed by the by Israel, right? So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
could
exactly.
also argue that from the other end.
Yeah, and I do. Yeah, 100%,
Okay.
100%. That's I mean that's part of honestly why Palestinians feel so they feel such a kinship amongst each other because they've experienced the mutual oppression from Jews. So, yeah, I mean, that 100% proves my point as well. That's kind of my point. Like the experience of Jews feeling oppressed by the non-Jews makes them want to have a Jewish state. The same way Palestinians feel oppressed by the Jews makes them want to have Palestinian state. Kurdish state, all this kind of thing. So, broad strokes. Like, I'm not sure about Palestinians, but I know there's been some stats somewhere in the US, like over 90% of ethnic Jews in the States are like Zionists. They want the Jewish state to exist as a Jewish majority country.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the vast majority of American Jews are also pro-Israel.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of my point on shared history. So I think that's just more of a, what do they call it? Descriptive sense that like when people have a shared history of struggle, maybe not like that as a struggle part, they want to almost separate from the people that can harm them.
Okay, hold on. Go
Uh,
ahead, keep going. But somebody in chat's telling me I'm wrong. So
about what the Jews?
yeah, about the Pew Research thing. But go ahead.
Oh, okay. um, what was I saying? So yeah, so the shared history part. I mean, I suppose I made more of a descriptive claim there about that when certain groups go through shared struggles in their history, they almost have an origin story that makes them want to kind of have their own little place that's
Okay.
separate from people not in their group.
Okay.
Um, so I think that's kind of what we see throughout history, and maybe my prescriptive claim is that I think that process has generally been uh, a positive development for those groups.
Okay.
Like the Jewish
Has it
state, I
though?
think
I mean,
I feel
there's
like the Jewish state.
consistent turmoil over there with Israel fighting with Palestine and back and forth, right? Like this has been a ongoing thing for ages. So I don't know. It may have not really worked out that great at all.
Yeah, I guess that will be remain to be seen. Was that phrase? That remains to be seen. Um, how that the whole Jewish thing turns out, but but I mean, generally, let's say like in Europe, where they went through that process of nation stateism. Like originally, like the nation states of Europe really used to be much more ethno nationalist, and I would say that generally worked out for them.
Okay.
Um, and let me think. I guess in modern day, there hasn't been too many examples of kind of this occurring, but just generally, I think kind of more mono ethnic countries are more stable. Um, so that's maybe why I would say that. But I mean, also just in the Jewish state, like at least Israel, I mean, it's doing extremely well as a country in general. Like it's quite
But okay,
modernized.
but
It's
hold on, because I think we need to let's try to move this along here because I think that having a shared history again is important and it can absolutely um, contribute to like a feeling of camaraderie. Sure, but again, we are now talking about Israel where they have the shared history and even some shared values, but I don't know, they're consistently at war. There's a fuck ton of problems over there. So I'm not sure again
yeah.
why the shared history is necessary to have the shared values.
Well, I wasn't making that claim about the necessary shared values thing. I was
Okay.
making just more of the idea that having a shared history pushes people in a direction of wanting to separate and have their own little place.
But I don't know
Nation
if that's
state for
necessary.
the
Like,
modern
so
sense.
I understand that you're making a descriptive claim, not necessarily a prescriptive claim. But if people
Yeah,
have a
that's
shared
true.
history and that makes them want to separate, I don't necessarily care. It would depend again why they want to separate. So if like a bunch of Black Americans said, well, we have a shared history of oppression, so we want to form our own ethno state where no white people are allowed. I would say, well, I don't care what your shared history is, and I don't care that that's kind of what your natural inclination is to gravitate towards that, because that would result in a harm that would fuck over the country. And also, humans are social creatures. I think that we can absolutely work together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that is yeah, yeah. That's I don't 100% too much like yeah, I don't too much disagree on that. But I think where we get in the weeds a little bit is I think like a lot I think human nature generally is racist. I think trying to get humans to not be so not racist, not the I mean just like bigoted
Well, what you're talking
or
about is
xenophobic.
tribalism.
Yeah, yeah, or tribal essentially. Like, are you familiar with Gordon Allport?
Well, hold on.
His book on
Well, I don't
prejudice.
think we need to go that way because you're right that there is some degree of a natural tribalistic tendency among humans. But again, I don't care because just if something is natural doesn't mean that it's good or it's the way that humans should live. I bring up this point a
Yeah,
lot, but like
yeah.
part of the reason that humans have made it to the top, right? We're like the king of nature or whatever. Part of the reason is because humans don't just follow their instincts or just go the natural route. We literally fight against nature when necessary.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand that. That's kind of a to me. That's kind of a technocratic viewpoint. Like, I'm a little bit more like I don't think humans have transcended nature that much as we think. Especially like when you think about social media and how we're such slaves to how we're such slaves to technology these days. And honestly, yeah, like in terms of that dopamine hit, like yeah, and just like the fact that bigotry and xenophobia just is so rampant, and I don't think like I guess it's decreased slightly, especially in the Western world, but like I just don't think it's realistic to ever think that this could be removed from human society just because I don't know after reading that book I
I
referenced
don't
by
think that's
Gordon
true at
Allport.
all. I think that, again, I bring up studies a lot about how people become less racist when they are living among diverse groups of people.
I've never actually read some of those studies. Do you know if they check like if to make that claim, I would think that you have to check the same people who were living in like bumblefuck rural America who never saw a black person, who was hardcore racist, and you had to check if they became less racist by moving to a big city. I haven't looked at those studies. Does it? What is it? What is it? Does it just see that people in urban environments are not so racist and people in rural environments are racist? What exactly does that show?
I mean, I can pull some up. I don't think I can remember it just directly off the top of
Because
my
I
head.
was
But
always
no, it's
very
not just,
skeptical.
hey, people in urban areas are less racist. It's that people who are racist tend to report less racism and report better relations with the general neighborhood when they live amongst diversity. They become less racist to a degree. So I mean,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
if
I
that
mean,
were a even if that were a natural thing, like that natural inclination to towards tribalism can be fought against. And I think that we can all agree that America, for example, being like one of the biggest world superpowers, we have a fuck ton of diversity here in this country. I don't think that you need to have some shared or some enclave where you all have the exact shared history and shared values to still have a very successful country overall.
yeah, yeah. Where I slightly disagree is that like I don't think it's necessary. I just think it's more likely. that a mono-ethnic kind of area would be more peaceful, more what's the word I'm looking for? Not homogenous, like more cohesive than a diverse one. And I mainly get that from what's his
No,
name?
I don't. Yeah, I'm not
Robert
sure.
Putnam's research.
Okay.
I mainly believe that from Robert Putnam's research. I mean, a lot of people say that he was misquoted or whatever, but he
No,
really
Putman
just
was
does
like
show.
his study was incorrect. So they re-reviewed that exact same data and they found that part of the reason that people didn't get along as well was again not because of diversity, but because the white people in the neighborhood were racist. They were uncomfortable at the sight of seeing black people. But again, we
Can
would
you
know that if this
can
were
you can you
happening,
show, can you do you have a link to that quickly?
yeah.
I haven't
But
seen
we
that.
know that if they were living in that city for a long period of time, they're likely to become less racist.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's it. I have not seen that thing on Putnam, that thing you just referenced.
I will send this to
But
you right here. I have it up on my
that would
screen
be
too.
that would be pretty interesting to note.
Does diversity
Um,
create distrust? From Scientific American. Doubts about a Harvard professor's landmark finding. Let me see if I can just find the little blurb here. So, after
you know
reanalyzing the
when they
same
did?
data set used by Putnam, Abskull and someone else, I'm not going to try to say their last name, asserted that when it comes to distrust and diversity, most of the distrust is expressed by whites who feel uncomfortable living among racial minorities. In other words, greater distrust may stem from prejudice rather than from diversity.
Uh, right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's an
They
interesting
break this
idea,
down a
but
lot deeper, though, too. Using the
yeah.
index, a community made up of 80% whites and 20% blacks would be considered equally diverse as one made up of 20% whites and 80% blacks. This is a problematic assumption. Think about the example of a neighborhood that's 80% white and 20% black. If I am a white person living in that neighborhood, I'm much more likely to interact with people who are the same race as me than if I were living in a neighborhood that is 80% black. If I'm black living in the same neighborhood, the opposite is likely to be true. They found that whites living with more racial minorities reported the highest levels of distrust.
And compared to like minorities living amongst whites, kind of like
Yeah, it
mostly
seems as
minorities
though
living
white
amongst.
people were really reporting the most distrust.
Oh, I see. I see.
They
Interesting.
also found
Interesting.
another factor which skewed Putnam's results. The survey that Putnam drew his findings from is called the Social Capital Community Benchmark Survey. It was administered in 2000 to a nationally representative sample. One question reads, quote, generally speaking, would you say that most people can be trusted or that you can't be too careful in dealing with people? And respondents are asked to answer on a 3-point scale, expressing high, moderate, or low levels of trust. Past research has shown that blacks and Hispanics on average report less trusting attitudes than do whites. Without controlling for this, neighborhoods with more blacks and Hispanics will appear to have lower trust, but for reasons having nothing to do with the degree of diversity. I'll send this to you.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I haven't actually seen that specifically, but that would be interesting for me to check out. Um, um, yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not an expert on all of that diversity stuff, but what was I going to say? But yeah, I mean, generally that claim about the shared history thing, the whole prescriptive aspect of why that's beneficial for them to want to separate. Um, yeah, that would be kind of the next step that I haven't honestly like I don't know proved to myself that much. So in that sense, I'm definitely open for obviously changing my mind on certain things.
But don't you feel like
Um,
if we're wanting to have it, so obviously, I can tell that you're here in good faith and you're obviously not here like maliciously trying to be fucking racist or something. And I don't think you're being
no.
racist. But it does sound like part of the reason that you are in favor of this form of ethnic nationalism is because you genuinely believe that it would make the country or whatever, wherever that nation is, right? You believe that it would make it a better place to live. Like what you said, more cohesion, a peaceful, better place. But
Yeah, but I'll be specific there. I specifically mean in terms of social capital, in the way Robert Putnam describes it, in the
But
sense of
don't you
stability
recognize
and
that diversity has brought a lot of benefits as well? I mean, I talk a lot about how diversity aids in innovation, how diversity plays a big role in benefiting our economy, how, I mean, there's a lot
yeah.
of ways in which diversity can benefit the country significantly.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. No, no, I mean, especially even my personal experience, I've experienced that myself. Like I've actually what I was a little bit more extreme, and then just by living more in a diverse place, I have become less extreme on that
Hey,
aspect. In terms
nice.
of no, just in terms of understanding that it is possible for a diverse place to have high social capital, have high trust, have high stability, have not a lot of crime, etc. But I
Mhm.
think the big caveat there is that um, there has to be a relatively like not a lot of inequality essentially, like socioeconomic inequality,
I
and
agree.
people generally still have to have shared values. Like if you have a bunch of like hardcore Muslims next to a bunch of I don't know atheists, or a bunch of hardcore Christians next to a bunch of atheists, and expect them to live together in harmony, I just that's not going to work out that well. So like the situations where I've found this whole diversity thing work is in these kind of cosmopolitan big cities where everyone kind of has the same views and same values. Would you disagree with that?
I mean, these big cities have a lot of socioeconomic inequality. So, I mean, I don't know that I think you're right that yes, generally in urban areas, people are they tend to be a little bit more liberal. Um, but that kind of goes against what you just said because there isn't socioeconomic equality in a lot of these cities. That's where we get into the conversation about systemic racism and whatnot.
I think if you look a little more closely, like you'll find that a place like New York, while
Mhm.
being diverse, it's extremely segregated. Like no one in New York has. I think there's some stats on this, but no one in New York has like friends or acquaintances from really vastly different economic
Well, a
situations.
lot of that segregation is not, again, it's not like enforced by the government. Obviously, it's kind of it's natural segregation because of historical policies. I mean, this is why we still see a disproportionate amount of black people living in, say, the projects, right? Is because of
Yeah,
the history there of oppression and the reason, or
yeah.
as to why they were forced into those areas and kind of
Yeah,
kept there.
but I'd say those differences are not obviously just that, but they're also just extremely different kinds of people. Like I don't know if you've been to New York or big cities and been to kind of like quote unquote more I don't want to say ghetto, but lower economic areas.
Yeah, no, I know
Like
what you mean.
the people you meet, like I don't get along with them, and it's not because of their skin color. Like I see Hispanics, whites, blacks who have that kind of vibe, and I just don't get along with them. Like I can't really speak to them that well. They kind of sound dumb. Like I have nothing to say to them really.
Yeah, but that could change, right? So we know, for
While a
example, that
middle
when
class, upper
immigrants,
class,
well, hold on,
yeah,
because
sorry.
we know that when immigrants come to America, they're far more likely to assimilate to general American culture rather than try and change American culture to bend to their will. So, I mean, that could absolutely change. So, yeah, you're right. Like,
Right.
obviously, there's going to be differences. I mean, I bring this up when I'm debating white nationalists. I'll talk about how, like, I have more in common with my black neighbor than I would with a rich white guy living in California, obviously. But just if there are
Okay. Yeah.
differences, I don't think that that doesn't mean that they can never be solved.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. So that's kind of where I get into the whole, it's like not impossible. It's just like much, it's very difficult and much less likely if
I
there's
don't think that's
radical
true.
differences.
I don't think that's true.
Um,
There's less segregation in America than there was previously, and things are getting better. I know we focus quite a lot
I
on the
don't know if it's getting
negatives.
better.
Well, we focus quite a lot on the negatives, and it's true that there's still a long way to go, but we're also living in the best world yet, especially when we're talking about America. We're advancing, we're getting further, and things are
Yeah,
progressing
I don't
towards
know.
a positive direction.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not living in America anymore. I feel like I don't. I feel like it's not getting better, but at least you're optimistic. But like, where
Well, I
am I
mean,
going
when
with
we're
this?
talking about like
Like,
technology developing, medicine, innovation, which is something that's directly benefited by diversity, these things are leading us towards better outcomes for sure. Again, I'm not saying there's no problems in America. There are plenty of problems in America. My whole fucking streams are dedicated to talking about all the problems in America. But like, I don't think that that means that America is getting worse. I think that we are absolutely advancing and moving towards more positive outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally the progressive kind of point of view, which I kind of disagree with, just that general like progression of moral progression in a straight line. But like, I don't want to get too much, I guess, into that. But I want to try to get back into really our the main point about why I kind of think ethnic nationalism it might be the most stable option out of our other options. Um, so, what might I want to talk about? Yeah, we kind of went to a tangent there. Oh yeah, I kind of want to mainly talk about the European context, I suppose.
Okay.
Like, let me think where I can we can have an interesting conversation. Oh yeah, maybe like so another part of why let me think. Yeah, maybe I don't sorry.
No, well,
I didn't
while you're
prepare.
thinking about that, because when you brought up the Europeans there, that made me think about how, like, what we were talking about with the Pilgrims coming here and leaving England because of the Church of England. But, like, even that, I feel like might speak against your argument, right? Because there you have people who did have a shared history, but their values were completely disaligned. That's what led to the
Right.
creation of America. So I don't
Right.
know if having a shared history, I know you're not necessarily saying a shared history will lead to shared values, but just having a shared history doesn't necessitate better social cohesion. And I almost feel
Oh
like the
yeah, yeah,
fact
yeah.
that America exists is evidence of that.
Right, right. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yes, I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, to get into. So yeah, the that's an interesting idea. The so you were saying the Pilgrims, right? They had a shared history, but they left because of lack of shared values. In case something different. Um, yeah. So I would say maybe on that point. I would think that, like I was saying, nothing necessitates, but I just find it much more likely. And by more likely, I mean like, it just would be so much easier to develop social cohesion. And
But
I think
no,
social
that's
co
not true because the other thing you need to take into account is the practicality of this. So maybe you could hypothesize some perfect society in which everybody has the exact same shared history and shared values. But the facts of the matter is nothing like that exists right now. And the only
I mean,
way
I
that you
think
could
that's what
make
we
it, well, hold
have.
on, because the only way that you can make it exist is a degree of enforcing, right? You would have to either kick
Right.
out people who didn't share those values or socially discourage them to a large degree. And I mean, this is an example from the
Uh,
military, so this might not be directly analogous, but I think it applies here enough so. They found that when the military, at least in Britain, was very focused
I
on
couldn't dream of being a
prohibiting
villain half as
diversity,
good as
they
you,
actually
Hunter.
negatively impacted general society and the general society's perception of the military. So, if your
hmm.
goal is more social cohesion by advocating against other people who have the different values or whatever, you could actually fuck over social cohesion even more.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting idea, but I was mainly going the direction of like I think before the mass immigration of let's say Nordic countries, I mean there was an enormous amount of high trust and social cohesion. In Japan, there's still a lot of it, high trust and social cohesion. I mean there's very little
I don't know.
diversity. Places like
But Japan,
I
it's
mean
but hold on, wait, because
Morocco,
people
in
bring up
places like
Japan a
Morocco
lot. Well,
or
hold on, because people bring up Japan a lot, but even if there's higher social cohesion, you also have way higher rates of suicide, and Japan is not doing well. Last I checked, they're actually desperate for immigration.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely possible, but by social cohesion, like Japanese people generally, like they have high, what do you call it? Ethnic
Biases,
what's that
maybe.
phrase called? Yeah, in group bias, and so and same with the Nordic countries. I mean, before mass immigration, I mean there's enormous high trust, and there's generally just a lot of social like people like you could predict how the people around you would behave but now, I mean, in
I don't
places
think
like
you can,
Sweden
though.
or
That's another problem. And it's that kind of thinking and that attitude that actually stifles innovation specifically. Because,
but how would you disagree with that? Like in the Nordic countries, like
well,
before
not
mass
with the, I'm
immigration,
not
like
disagreeing necessarily with the Nordic countries because I would need to do my research on the history there and how that all played out. But I mean, generally speaking, this is why I talk a lot about the innovation aspect is that when you are surrounded by people who look similar to you, then you're more likely to perceive them as having the same values as you, even if they don't, which does lead to a degree of groupthink and it stifles innovation.
I mean, I don't really care about innovation. I'm just really focused on that people don't like want to kill each other or like hate each other because of how they look or whatever. And
I
should
agree with
like
that, but
essentially,
you have to care about innovation because it's because of innovation that, again, we are where we are today, that we have the best medicine, the best technology.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, I haven't really thought about the whole innovation thing. I'm not like a technocrat. I just want like people to be happy. Like, and I just think the way to maximize happiness is if people can trust the people around them and kind of predict that they won't harm them by being around them.
I
And
agree
I
with
just,
that, sure, but that's very, very basic. I think that people are also tend to be more happy if they're in a better socioeconomic situation, and more people in the country stimulating the economy contributes to that. People tend to be happier if they're in better health, and more diversity leads to more innovation, leading to better medicine, which then would lead to people being happier because they're healthier.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm on board with the whole like how innovation is so critical there. To be honest, just because like I don't know, like happiness is not related to economic prosperity necessarily. Yeah, I mean, some of the most rich
Mm,
countries are
no, 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 no. So
um,
you're sorry, I'm cutting you off a lot. Go ahead. Sorry.
like some of the richer countries are happiest, like Finland, for example. But like the most rich country, the U.S. or some of the other richest, like Finland's not the most rich country in the world. And like I think people generally in the Middle East, like as much as they're leaving the Middle East, like I mean I spent a lot of time there. Like they're generally what like happy. And there's not a lot of suicide, etc. And they're generally very poor. Um, and
Well, that's
a
because
lot of
people tend to
people.
be happier. You're right that like wealth is not going to contribute to happiness, but I'm pretty sure there are statistics that exist that demonstrate that people who are financially stable tend to be just as happy as people who are like disgustingly rich. It's not so much as
Right.
having a fuck ton of money creates happiness, but rather the socioeconomic stability that creates happiness. And you're
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
have more socioeconomic stability if you have more people in the country stimulating the economy and more
I mean,
innovation, which opens up
I
to
don't
more jobs.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, just because of the Middle East example I was talking about, like, just like
I
there's
would have
really
to
not a
look
lot of
into that. I would
innovation
be
there.
very shocked to hear that people in the Middle East, where they're being persecuted or women are forced to cover up all the time, I don't know if those people are genuinely happier.
I mean, depends on where you are, honestly. Like, yeah, that's why I think lived experience helps here a little bit, just because I've really been there and I've spoken to these like people and like people like in bumblefuck like Bedouins and in Jordan or in Palestine or
Yeah, but what
I
about
don't know.
Japan? Like you brought up that they have more social cohesion, but look at the rates of depression and anxiety and suicide over there. It's massive.
Right, right. So it's not a one to one like a cause and effect here. There's multiple. It's multivariate, obviously. But but what was I going to say? I don't know what the issue. I really don't know what the issue is in Japan. It's probably a good question to explore. But yeah. So I mean, I'm not saying that I have a perfect view here. I just wanted to kind of discuss things with you, but I have a lot, obviously, to read more on all these views, and I think, yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's all multivariate, really. The whole idea of social cohesion, happiness, trusting the people around you. It's really all multivariate, and I'm not going to say I know 100% all the answers. It's a really extremely deep question,
The thing is, though,
but
is I agree with you that, yeah, it's not just like cut and dry, black and white, one to one. But because it's not, then I don't know why we would need to get hung up on this ethnic nationalism thing. It's obvious that when socioeconomic situations are better, people can get along, whether they have similar values or not. Again, if
I would
someone's
say when
value,
socioeconomic situations are more equal, perhaps
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
not
When,
necessarily
when there's
better.
more equality among socioeconomic situations, yeah, then that's going to
Yeah,
lead to more trust and whatnot.
yeah.
And if we also know that diversity can bring benefits to the country as well, then I don't know if we would want to just cut that out just for the sake that it might, because you don't really know. It's just maybe it will improve social cohesion. It
Yeah,
also might not.
the whole diversity thing, like, I really just think it depends heavily on who you bring in. Like, I don't think all people, cultures, values are equal. So I would probably with you on the whole the diversity inherently is a
I've
good thing.
been
It's
dream of
really just
being a
about the type
man
of
half as
diversity.
good as you,
And
Hunter.
I would say generally that the people who immigrate, like, it's not a very diverse sense of diversity. Like, it's really, what is the word? It's, what's that word I'm looking
Forced diversity.
Yeah, no, it's not. No, I'm saying it's like it's taking the same kind of person all across the world. Like the people, it's what is that? It's pick what is that word? Fuck. Um it's I'm sorry, I don't know if you can curse here. But it's like all the people have to apply for the visa. It's a crazy difficult process. They're probably slightly more intelligent to have to do that. Probably slightly less poor than others who can't do it, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's kind there's a word for that. I forgot the word.
Well, I mean,
It's
I
like,
think that we probably can start to wrap up the convo here, but I guess I'll
yeah,
just kind of close with this: is that you say that you sort of, I know you didn't say specifically like verbatim that you feel like it would be better, but you kind of said that like you sort of have this sense that it would probably improve things. But the thing is that
right.
if you're going to come to a conclusion as to whether or not this thing is more likely, you can only make an informed conclusion based on what we already know. And so what we already know is that we had Europeans who had shared history and they didn't have shared values. And that's what led to America being created. We have Japan, where there's a lot more cohesion, social cohesion, but way higher rates of suicide and depression. What we know, what we actually have, is that your conclusion is wrong. Based on what we know, to make an informed conclusion, it seems as though whether or not you have diversity or shared values, that is not going to necessarily better society. I think that being more
No,
inclusive and more accepting,
generally,
reaping the
I generally just
benefits of more people stimulating the economy and innovating, that is going to lead to way better and higher rates of happiness.
I generally just disagree, just because mainly in the European context, just the people they've been bringing in are not the right people, and so this kind of this diversity has shown it's not inherent positive, in terms of just the social discohesion and the terrorist attacks, and then it's also a physical net negative if you look at UK stats, in terms of non-EU immigration. Um, so yeah, I don't think what we know now is really simply pro this diversity idea, mainly in the European context. So I would just
Sure.
disagree there.
Well, I don't know if I
Um,
wouldn't say that we know, but I would say that if we're going to make an informed estimate, the evidence seems to suggest that social cohesion can absolutely still be a thing with diversity, with different
Yeah,
values.
yeah. That's why I think you really have to get the right people in terms of like the people who are on board with the idea of what you're trying to do. Like the people they brought in Europe, they're not on board with the European idea. Like the yeah, I mean I mean we see a lot of crazy shit happening in the UK with like
I would have to
Pakistanis and stuff.
look that up because I know I've heard a lot about like the Muslim rape gangs or whatever, but I
Yeah.
think that generally crime rates actually decreased.
In the UK, I mean, it's possible, but like, just literally pretty much every single European country, non-EU people, specifically like Moroccans and others, are just incredibly the vast majority of people in prisons. Like, I think in Italy, it was like 8% foreign born, but like they're over 30, 40% in prisons. Um, just like they haven't brought in the right people. So it's not diversity as an inherent positive, in my opinion.
Okay,
You have to bring the right people who are on board with the idea of what you're trying to do.
sure.
And if you don't, then I think we've seen in Europe, like it's like shit can go wrong.
Yeah, but I think that we also can see here from America that shit can go right. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why maybe yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm getting with the most likely like more likely. Like if you can control immigration to the extent that America has and bring in the right people, then yeah, yeah, I think it's probably not that bad. But in the European context, they seem to not be able to control it, or maybe not have the will to. And if your idea was correct, then we would expect Europe to just keep getting better and better.
I believe
But
it has though. I'm pretty sure again, I think the crime rates have gone down, but I'll look into that. Either way, I appreciate you coming on here and I
yeah.
also appreciate the good faith convo and yeah, you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, from your YouTube things I've seen and other stuff, like it seems like you get some really dumb people, but yeah, I appreciate you seem to be a good faith guy too.
Thanks, man. Yeah, there's some people are definitely crazy, but yeah, this was definitely a better conversation than some. So, all right.
Yeah, thank you.
See ya.
Bye bye.